will be a very productive use of your time. So my name is Joyce Brown, Director of Programs at Health of Mother Earth Foundation. So my job here is to introduce the campaign, the event, and I'll hand over to the moderator. So I'll also briefly introduce the organizers of this event. So Health of Mother Earth Foundation is doing this in partnership with AGC, A Growing Culture, and it is all under a bigger campaign under the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. So we have other countries carrying out a similar campaign as well across Africa. So Health of Mother Earth Foundation is an ecological think tank and an advocacy organization promoting food sovereignty as well as environmental and climate justice in Nigeria and in Africa, right? So we have our head office and some branch offices here in Nigeria. We also have an office in South Sudan as well as in Togo. So our key areas of work, one is tagged hunger politics, focusing on issues relating to food, biosafety, biodiversity, GMOs, forests, and talking about hunger in general and the politics around that. So we kick against modern agricultural biotechnology and promote agroecology as a way to achieve food sovereignty. We have other key areas, including one tag fossil politics that addresses issues of environmental pollution, resulting from the disruptive and destructive activities of the fossil fuel industries. So in that space, we are promoting a just transition away from dependence on fossil energy, to renewable energy. We also have a knowledge space where we, that's called Ikenna, where we generate and share ideas relating to food and the environment at large. We have a fourth one focusing on communities and culture, talking about grassroots mobilization, youth action, and many others. So we encourage you to go to our website. You'll see more information about us there at www.homef.org. Now, we have put this together in collaboration with AGC, and that's a formidable group that is promoting food sovereignty for everyone and at all times. They believe that food sovereignty is a human right, dignity, diversity, and culture are human rights, and then they're committed to taking action, promoting actions through networking, learning and relearning, supplying or promoting communally gathered resources to achieve the vast future of food sovereignty that we are talking about. So this event is basically to promote behavioral change, to have people revalue and remember the value of local foods, local healthy foods, right? There are so many challenges our food systems are facing today, from the diseases that accompany the consumption of highly overprocessed foods to genetic modification of foods resulting in a number of diseases that we'll be hearing about much later, and then the excessive use or the overdependence on pesticides and many other challenges. So this event will help us look at these issues and talk about the way out of them. Another thing that this event will help us achieve is to influence the development of a holistic food policy for Nigeria and for the whole of Africa that can address all of these issues and ensure that our local economies are sustained and we are able to eat and grow food that is healthy and appropriate for us. So I will introduce the panelists, the moderator who will take us through the rest of the program. But just before I do that, you're encouraged to kindly note your questions throughout the event. Whatever questions you have, there'll be a space for you to ask those questions later on. So our moderator for today, her energy is unmatched. So you should be ready for an interesting session today, as well as an enlightening one. She is a lawyer and an environmental as well as food rights activist. She's the deputy director at Friends of the Earth Nigeria. She's also the coordinator of the food sovereignty program of Friends of the Earth Africa. She wears many caps, and we can go on and on to talk about her, but I'll leave it right here and hand over to Mariann. You have the floor.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say how happy and honored I am to be in the presence of such great Niger people all over the continent. You get to meet them, so I mean all over the world, with such grace and such excellence and power. Today, we are happy to have presenters who are all gatekeepers. I mean, gatekeepers who don't just stand at the gates, but they open the doors for good things to happen to everybody. They come with so much power, so much grace, and it's going to be sizzling hot. You know, Nigeria, we like it hot, hot. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker. I mean, most of us call him the living ancestor. He also wears many caps. He doesn't like much introduction, but we are going to introduce him all the same. He's an architect, an environmental activist, author, poet, and a clergyman. He chaired Friends of the Earth International from 2008 through 2012 and was the executive director of Environmental Rights Action, Friends of the Earth Nigeria, for 2 decades. He was one of Times Magazine's Heroes of the Environment in 2009, and in 2010, Nimmo Bassey was named a laureate of the Right Livelihood Award, and in 2012, he was awarded the Rapture Prize. He also received an honorary doctorate from the University of York, UK, in 2019. He serves in many diverse boards, international boards, that if I want to start now, we will not go to the business of the day. He is currently the director of the Health of Mother Earth Foundation, and we are so pleased to have him here. And like I told you before, the food is already in the stove, is cooking with, let me just clap all of you. Let's just announce and welcome our living ancestor to start this party. The food is already cooking. Please bring out your plates. It's gonna be tasty. Welcome, Nimmo Bassey.
Thank you so much, Mariann. You went overboard. That was a very elaborate and needless introduction. Well, thank you all the same. It's really a pleasure to be on this very important webinar, and good to see you all, and to see all enthusiasts in the food system that we operate in. So I'll be speaking very briefly on what I've titled Food, Culture, Life. And of course, each of those words tell a story about what I want to focus on. And so thank you for joining this meeting. So Joyce has already introduced my Food is African campaign. And you would understand and agree with me that foods across the continents of the world are basically from crops and animals distributed by nature across the regions. And each region has food crops that are most suited for its own needs. And so this is why we campaign and demand food sovereignty. Food sovereignty means supporting majority farmers, who are the ones who are feeding the world, who produce food and food crops that are most suited for the areas where they are located, food crops that are suited to that are already adapted to the climate, suitable for the culture of the people, suitable for their spiritual requirements and observances, and a food that kind of captures and supports their life. And so when we talk about food sovereignty, we're talking about the decolonization of our land, decolonization of agriculture. If you look back at the colonial era, before colonization, food was very diverse. Farmers planted what was needed for the local population and for neighbors. So colonization brought in plantation agriculture, which did not in any way consider the needs of the local population, but was producing food crops for export. Little wonder these crops were called cash crops, because after introducing the fiction of money, the colonialists had to ensure that the colonized people were hooked on their own economic model by getting them to plant for money rather than planting for food. So we need to decolonize our food by changing our imagination and imaginaries, rethinking food itself, rethinking agriculture itself, and knowing that we have to meet our own needs before we think of meeting the needs of machines and elsewhere. And so decolonizing agriculture also means decolonizing our food systems. Speaking up and standing up against GMOs and industrial agriculture, which has destroyed species and varieties, and which has promoted the use of artificial and chemical fertilizers, which are soil destroyers. And so decolonizing agriculture means, in a sense, decolonizing our culture, reviving our memories, recollecting who we are and who we ought to be. It means getting food that nourishes us and not food items that merely feeds people. Feeding people, the sense of feeding and not nourishment, is the kind of idea that accepts the kind of food crops that are not beneficial to our health. And so when we talk about our food, our culture and life, we're talking about our knowledge. Our farmers are knowledge holders. They don't need to have PhDs or doctors of science. They don't need to have laboratories in buildings. The farm is a living laboratory. And our farmers have the knowledge, they have the science, and they have the practice. And in history, our people have lived in very close harmony with Mother Earth, practicing crop rotation, producing crops that match, selecting crops that match climatic conditions, producing thousands of varieties of crops by selecting the best. And of course, our farmers never indulge in monocultures. Monocultures, as Vandana Shiva posited, also makes us to have monoculture of minds, one-track minds that does not bring about the movement that we need to preserve our knowledge. Our knowledge is not for sale, it's for life. And this is what our farmers have held for ages, and it's what we have to fight to protect. So decolonization means liberating our tongues. When we liberate our tongues, we regain all tastes that we've lost due to the prevalence of monocultures and junk food in our cities. So liberating our tongue is very important, not just for speaking, but for reviving our communities. Food has always been a celebration. If you look at the pictures I'm sharing now, I was very amazed to see this dish, and I really relished it. Was outside of Nigeria, egusi soup served with rice. They didn't call it egusi soup, they call it pumpkin seeds served with rice. But because maybe in that particular, the location where I was, they didn't understand how to swallow eba or pounded yam or fufu, but they could eat rice and just take this as soup to go with it. If you compare that to what you have on the right, you can see the diversities and other things that we find in our localities. So liberating our tongue is a cardinal struggle for all of us. Regaining the taste that we had in the past, our ancestors' taste. And really, when you regain your taste, you won't accept artificial tests that are loaded with artificial flavors and colors, but you enjoy the colors of nature. This is what our food is African is all about, to revive ourselves. We talk about natural crops, natural foods, foods served in a very artistic manner, beautiful and local. Now, and this is where I'm concluding this short presentation. We have to learn to celebrate our farmers. When you celebrate our farmers, you're celebrating what they produce, and you're celebrating our food. Our food is what we enjoy as collective, not what we hide in corners to eat alone. We put our food in basins, in big bowls, and we sit around and we talk and eat, celebrate, sing, and remind ourselves about who we are. So we're talking about, when we say my food is African, we're looking at building a movement that shifts our communities beyond resilience. I know you hear a lot about resilience, building crop resilience, climate resilience, but we have to go beyond that to resistance, resisting GMOs, resisting synthetic biology, resisting gene editing, and all these funny things that are totally uncalled for. But beyond resilience and resistance, we have to get to defense, standing together in solidarity, linking our hands, singing our songs, eating together, and defending our food systems. I believe that when we do this, we will, as we do this, we are really building up our food is African. Thank you so much. And I hope I brought both the key and the note, and we are now set to proceed with the celebration.
Thank you so much, Comrade Nimmo. You really got this party started. I mean, even if we don't get to hear any other thing, this is very moving and touching, and we are good to go. I mean, there's certain words that came out. Learn to celebrate our farmers, building a movement, resistance, resilience, and respect. Respect for the people who cook the food, respect for the people who produce this food, respect of the people, respect of the culture. Our food is power. Our food is us. Our food is who we are. So you cannot disrespect our food. And just look at that presentation. Look at the okra. Look at the egusi. I feel like just eating it, taking it from that seat and just eating it. Thank you so much. I'm going to introduce the panel. Interesting lineup. Like I told you, they are all Nigerians, but in different continents. We have on this panel, Yemi Amu, who is the founder and director of Oko Oba Farms Incorporated. In 2013, she established the NYSC's first and only publicly accessible outdoor aquaponics farms, the Oko Farms Aquaponics Education Center. She directs all of Oko Farms programs, including education, design, to build projects, and community-related activities. Yemi is one of NYSC's leading aquaponics experts and is a committed educator. Over the past decade, she has facilitated the creation and maintenance of over 20 edible species throughout NYSC. She's a powerful woman. Created and implemented various culinary, nutrition, and gardening programs for both youth and adults, and promotes aquaponics as a tool for environmental awareness and stewardship. Yemi has a master's in health and nutrition education from Teachers College, Columbia University. In 2021, Yemi became part of the inaugural cohort of the Dosta Industrial Experiment Design Lab, created by the Testa Gates and Prada. I'm sure most times when some of us think of farmers, we look at, old people in the village, looking scruffy, emaciated, poverty-stricken, but look at this beautiful, young, dynamic lady. She's based in the US, and she is a farmer. I mean, she has a master's. She wants to be called a farmer, but she is a scholar, a good one at that. And she's a Nigerian. Ladies and gentlemen, I told you it was cooking. Nimmo just started the food. Get ready. We're going to have a very sumptuous lunch. Please welcome with me, Yemi. I'm going to do the clapping because she is a star. I'm also going to introduce another person, a farmer in our midst. She's also a strong lady. I mean, she's also educated. She leads a powerful network in Nigeria. Her name is Loveland Ejim. She is the founder of the Network of Women and Youth in Agriculture. She is the Southeast Vice President of Rice Farmers Association of Nigeria, RIFAM. Loveland is also the chairperson of Pan-African Rural Women's Council. She has represented the farmers in many forums, many meetings, and she's very outspoken to tell you that the farmers have the solution. Of course, like Yemi, she's also educated. You would think to be she's a young, dynamic lady who is leading farmers into glory. And of course, you'll hear her speak soon. Also, in this panel is our brother, Ikenna, Bobmanuel. He's a private chef and a food developer who is passionate about promoting the diverse edible culture of West Africa and the diaspora. Growing up with a Nigerian heritage and traveling throughout West Africa as a young teenager, this influenced his perspective on food and culture. Ikenna believes that food is a great connector and an opportunity to initiate conversations to find local solutions to local problems and appreciation for indigenous and underutilized ingredients could be the answer to many of the challenges in our food systems. If we frame our consumption to a paradigm that celebrates and protects our resources and identity. He's currently based in Accra and works as a food consultant for restaurants and instructs at the School of Culinary Arts, Ghana. He's also a member of the Ghana Food Movement, a network that promotes food sustainability in Ghana. I mean, he's a young, dynamic man. I mean, most times we think that it's only women that can cook, but Ikenna can give you a run for his money. And he's going to tell you that our food is really African, it's Nigerian, and that we need to celebrate our food. And like I said, he's a young man. It's not just, when people think about food, farming and things, it feels it has to be with the old people in the communities, but these are young people doing great and mighty things. Our last panelist is Ms. Jacqueline Kutuyan. She's a nutritionist and a medical practitioner, a pastor and an entrepreneur, and a food safety activist. She's the CEO at BFA Integrative Health and Wellness Clinic, and also the country director at Biointegrity and Natural Food Awareness Initiative. Over the years, she has been dedicated to the struggle for a resilient food system and is at the forefront of the resistance of GMOs in Nigeria. This is also another powerful lady, dynamic, a dynamite, who is also speaking out to say that our food should not be contaminated, that we have all it takes to feed our people and even the whole of Africa. Having said that, we're going to get this party started. And like people have said, please write the questions, because at the end of this, we'll have an opportunity for you to ask your questions. Just want to get this started. So without much ado, we'll start with question one, which will go to both all the speakers here. So before we talk about Nigerian food, we have to define what is Nigerian food. So these questions will go to all the panelists, like I've said. In one short sentence, please just keep it very brief, 2 minutes at most. What does Nigerian food mean to you? I can start with Yemi and then go to Ikenna, then Loveland. Just in a few minutes, what does Nigerian food, when you think of Nigerian food, what does it mean to you?
Thank you for that lovely, amazing introduction, Mariann. Wow, when I think of Nigerian food, I think of home, I think nourishing, I think diverse, I think powerful. And I'll give an example. I had an event on the farm on Saturday. It was workshop and dinner, and the chef who was part of the event cooked sorghum. And people got to eat sorghum for the first time. All of the people who showed up on the farm got to eat sorghum for the first time. And it just shows the beauty and power and magnificence of African food. People got to be introduced to something different and delicious, and they loved it. And now they're going to be looking for they're going to be looking for sorghum to eat. And it was sorghum that we grew here. So not is African food only able to grow in Africa and nourish people in Africa, it's also able to grow in the West and nourish people here and bring people together. So it also brings people together. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Food is a connector. It brings people together. I mean, in Africa, you can't do anything without food. So Ikenna, what does it mean to you? Ikenna, you're muted. Oh, Loveland, you can, what does food mean to you before Ikenna comes on? I don't know, it's on. Lovely, you are muted too. You want to unmute yourself? I know. We can't hear you. Or is it just?
I can hear you.
I can't hear Loveland, or is it just me? Okay. Loveland, we can't hear you. George, can you unmute her?
Let's bring back in Ikenna. It's issue with her computer.
Yeah.
Okay, Ikenna is muted from here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So, what does Nigerian food mean to you?
I would say Nigerian food screams and celebrates the nature's bounty, and also the ethno diversity. Just like in Nigeria, each region in Nigeria has a different rendition of a particular dish. For instance, in Nigeria, you have.
Can you come close to the mic so we can hear you properly? It's like very far, maybe.
Can you hear me?
It's a little better. Yeah, it's much better now.
Okay. Okay. So I said Nigeria, Nigerian food, think of Nigerian food, it screams nature's bounty, the beauty of nature's bounty, and also ethno diversity because of the fact that Nigerian cuisine is diverse with the diverse cultures you can find in Nigeria. For instance, you have, each region in Nigeria has different rendition of a particular dish. For instance, you have Ufaku, from the Igbo speaking part, and you have Banga from the South part. This is typically the same dish, but seen in different cultures and tribes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, I don't know if Lovely, you're ready to tell us. I mean, it means Nigerian food means a lot to all of us, different things, nostalgic. The food our grandmother cooks for us, nutrition is medicinal, it's for celebrations, It carries all kinds of things. I mean, it's loaded. It's spiritual. It's so many things. Lovely. Are you ready? Oh, we still can't hear you.
We'll give her a call and try to sort it out.
Okay, we'll just move to the next. Okay, while we're trying to sort that out, so we don't take much of time. I want to go to the next question. It's really fascinating to me in particular. I mean, we have two people who are celebrating Nigerian food today on this panel. One is Ikenna, who works with Nigerian and also works in Nigeria and also in Ghana, and in different varieties of ways. Another is Yemi, who is a farmer in New York. Like I said before, I mean, believe it or not, she has a master's. People would think that, oh, farmers are always people who should be looking scot-free, dirty, and in communities or rural areas. However, I want the two of you to tell us more, without me sounding like I'm one grandma picking up on our youths. Why are our folks, young people, losing the attraction for local food? Why do our people, you see young people, they feel it's more like a prestige thing to go for foreign foods or fast foods, and people rather want to order a pizza or now Indomie instead of going for real traditional food that would nourish us. So Ikenna, we want to start with you. Why do you think there's this craving for more of these fast foods instead of this nutrition? I mean, we saw the slides that were presented by Nimmo, those fine, nutritious food that were popping out from the screen. Why won't people, our young people, go for this food? Why is this rush and desire and taste for this fast food and foreign foods? So you can just keep your answer brief. Ikenna, are you there? Or Yomi, you can jump in and answer this, and then you can pick up when it comes. What do you think is the crave for so much of this processed and Western food?
As someone who grew up in Nigeria and also wanted all of the pizza and all the junk food, I think it's just ignorance. We don't do enough to teach our young people about our culture. We don't do enough to teach young people about our agricultural legacy and our food legacy. It took me stumbling upon a book a few years ago called In the Shadow of Slavery, Africa's Botanical Legacy in the New World. And that's what opened my eyes to like the bounty and richness of our food. I think it's just the way that we're raised. And the West has a huge influence on us. Hopefully that's going to be changing soon because there's all of this research. I mean, it's what got me into nutrition in the first place, about how the food that's eaten in the West is actually terrible for the West and causing everything from mental illness, depression, diabetes, you name it. And the things that the West promotes as healthy eating is stuff that just inherently are in our cultural food legacy anyway. We eat vegetables, we eat that all the time. We eat okra, we eat ewedu, we eat bitalif, we eat ugu, we eat all of that. That's just inherent in our foods. We don't have to like go out of our way to look for a salad to eat. So I think, for lack of a better term, it is ignorance, and ignorance that's rooted in white supremacy, because we are constantly fed images about the West that makes them seem superior, and everything about them, including their food, is considered better and more nutritious and more attractive than our culture. I think it's rooted in every aspect of us, and we've been using the word decolonize this morning. I think part of it is just decolonizing our mindset as well, and really connecting to our teaching our children to take pride, young people to take pride in who we are as Nigerians, who we are as Africans, and to learn about our, not just our ancestral legacy of farming, but how rich, diverse, and powerful and spiritual our food is. We don't just look at food as food. We don't just look at food as something that makes you fat or skinny. Our food is looked at as medicine. It's looked at as spiritual. It's looked at as, so many different things. It's there, it's incorporated into ceremonies and all of that. There's so much richness in the way that we approach food, and we don't teach our young people about that.
Thank you so much. I hear you. If it was in church, I would say, speak it. There's so much richness, so much spirituality. Everything is in our food. But before I bring it in now, what do you think can be done for people to have pride in our food, in our culture? I mean, food is like a connector. This is who we are. I mean, if food tells them, if I tell you Ewedu, already it's it's food from Yoruba. If I say Edikaikong, it's already coming from the South Side. If I say starch, it's from Delta State. How do we begin to put back this pride? It's like I say, bring back the pride that we have about our food, so people begin to respect the food, even because it starts from us. How do our young people, even not young people, even old people, how do we begin to instill this pride in our culture, in our food, in the things that we call our food, because it's part of us. I mean, you cannot separate yourself from it. How do we begin to bring back this pride? What do you think can be done?
Well, the way that I can speak to the way that I'm trying to do it, and I hope that catches on, is just to, even what you are doing now is just to keep talking about it. And what I'm doing in New York City is I'm just growing food. I'm growing ewedu, I'm growing tete, I'm growing egusi, I'm growing all of these things, and I'm talking about it, and I'm teaching people about it. Because I've been in the US so long, my lens is different. And what I learned when I moved, Africans are hungry. They don't have food. And what I've been doing with my work is really just demonstrating our food, demonstrating the breadth and variety of the food we have, and talking about it. I'll grow sorghum. Like I said earlier, I'll grow millet, and I'll talk about how nutritious it is. And because I'm young, because I present a certain way, there are a lot of young people who will be attracted to it. But I do think that the more of us that are farming, the more of us that are feeding our children, our young ones, our food, the more they're going to learn, talking about how harmful the food that is pushed by the West is. I think that's another aspect we don't talk about enough, that these foods are harmful. These foods are bad for your health. And if you embrace your local food, if you embrace your indigenous food, it is actually healthier for you. I mean, young people are very particular about how they look. So I tend to talk about like your skin and your hair and all of these things, and how that influences, and even your ability to like do the things that you want to do and be active. If you're not eating your local indigenous food, you're less likely able to do that. And a lot of young people also care about the environment. And if you care about the environment, then learning about your local food, learning about your indigenous food, learning about the people who grow it is important, and supporting them is also really important.
Ikenna,
Yeah.
I hope you're back with us now. I mean, you're a young Nigerian. You live both in Nigeria and Ghana. I mean, you're a chef. You're dealing with our food. So what can you say is causing young people, or generally people, from not taking pride in our food, in what we eat, in what we cook, in what defines us as a people? I mean, you've been in this food business for some time, and you're also young. So what can you say? I mean, you're closer to, I mean, you're like in between the youths, and also you're getting there. What would you say is the issue why we are not proud to say, oh, I like Eba, I like Egusi, I like Edikaikong, or you see people say, I want to eat Indomie, spaghetti, or things like that. What do you think is causing that amongst our people?
I think it's not just I would say it's not just a Nigerian syndrome. It's an African syndrome, because we as Africans, we as Nigerians, we need to look inward. We need to, there is need for us, as never before, to look inwards and appreciate what we have. Like take for instance, when I started my culinary journey, my culinary school, when I went to culinary school, it was all French cuisine, Italian cuisine that we learned in culinary school. And I became very curious, and I was so curious. What about African gastronomy? What's the future of African cuisine? And I think it's something that not just myself also, but also other chefs and young people, should take pride in. So I went on this, um, you know, I went on to explore, African food, learning more about indigenous ingredients, So I think it's something that we all, as Nigerians, young people, should take pride in. And again, the Western media, there is a Western perspective on African food in such a way that, Africans are not in that space to tell their stories. So we also want to see, Nigerians, telling their stories in media of, how beautiful, how amazing, how powerful, how spiritual, how energizing our food is, how nutritious our food is, So I think, and yeah, I think it's really expedient that we need to see and change these narratives, via the media.
So much, Ikenna. I don't know, is Loveline ready to, is your system okay? Can we bring her in? Or okay.
Okay, so I'm thinking I'm thinking to call her on WhatsApp. So I'll just put it on speaker and then you can hear from her. She's having issues with her audio.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm calling her right now. Sorry, apologies for the technology issues. Okay, so I think maybe we can go on and then I'll still try to reach her.
Okay, maybe you can also take up, since just you as I'll come back now to Ikenna and Yemi. I mean, it's interesting listening to both of you young people doing great and mighty things in this food sector. I mean, Yemi, you are a Nigerian in diaspora in the vast urban jungle in New York. What has inspired you to grow Nigerian food and make it available to folks in New York City? I mean, you're holding our banner high. I mean, I can imagine you're in New York, you are and growing Nigerian food. You are practically taking Nigeria to New York. What is the reality for our Nigerian brothers and sisters in foreign countries? And how can they be encouraged to want to grow Nigerian food? I mean, you're doing something really very good. I mean, you are Nigerian, living in New York and doing, so what was your motivation and what can you tell us? I mean, tomorrow I might want to do the same thing.
I think my motivation was twofold. Learning about Nigerian food actually allowed me to connect with myself as a Yoruba person, to connect with culture and legacy. There's so much about food herself. And it did not make sense for me as a Nigerian to be talking about kale and mustard greens and all of these things that I didn't grow up eating, that I have no ancestral connection to. How am I showing up as a How does what I grow reflect who I am, reflect my culture, reflect where I come from? Those questions started coming up for me. And how do I learn more about who I am? You know, as someone who came at 16, who also had, you know, for less of a better term, his upbringing, even in Nigeria, growing these foods has been a way and continues to be a way for me to learn about myself as a Yoruba person. The second thing that I would notice when I would go to certain neighborhoods, especially Asian cultures, is how they would grow their own foods. They would grow eggplants, you know, in front of their house. They would grow beautiful different types of varieties of beans and different types of peppers and onions. I ask myself, why am I not doing that? Look at these people, you know, growing their cultural foods in buckets in front of their home. And I have a farm, and that's not being reflected in my work. And then the third thing is I would go to these so-called African supermarkets and African shops, and I wouldn't even find any of the fresh foods. So if I wanted to eat, you know, ewedu and or egusi or all these things, they're not actually as easy to come by. And when you get them, they're not fresh. And I started to ask myself, like, where do we even, as an ordinary person, where do you even go and get these foods? How do you eat the food that you're used to or the food that you enjoy? Where does it come from? And it's very difficult to get because it has to be imported, and by the time it gets here, it's not fresh. So I just decided I'm going to grow it. At first, I was like, can it even grow? One. And two, how do I, you know, start to grow it? And how do I connect with other Africans? And if I'm not connecting with other Africans, how do I even make that food available to folks who are not Africans, but also need to diversify their diet, diversify their palate? And what has been happening over about 5 years since I've been doing it is A, I've been getting people who are curious, who want to learn about African food, and B, Nigerians who are like, hey, how do I get bure? How do I get this? How do I get that? Like, can I even grow it myself? So we're also making plants available for people to grow for themselves. But I'll say ultimately, this has been a journey in getting to know myself and in having pride in myself as a Nigerian and a Yoruba person, and also learning about, you know, someone was talking to me about bitter leaf last year or earlier this year, and the role that bitter leaf plays in Igbo culture and how it represents not just abundance of food security because of what they went through during the Biafra. So there's so much history also that is connected to our foods. And the more we learn about our food, the more we learn about our culture pre-colonization. And it brings a lot of pride. So for me, it is really learning about myself as a Yoruba person, learning about my history and culture as a Yoruba person, devoid of colonization, devoid of the white lens, and not seeing myself through that. And I encourage other Africans to do that, which is why I grow it and let them know that it's available. And for those who want to grow it themselves, they can come and get you know, plants or seeds or starts from it. It's a long process. It's not that easy. I'm still learning about the different crops and learning to grow them. And I'm really lucky that I'm able to do it in New York City in a very short window of time. We only have about 6 or 7 months to do it every year, but we're still able to do it. And I'm grateful for that.
Thank you so much, Amy. So I'll bring in Joyce, standing for Jackie. Joyce, are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, good to have you. I'm sure you've been one of those people in the forefront of the fight against GMOs and the propaganda in Nigeria. We are talking about Nigerian food, Nigerian diets, and having a wholesome diet, having something good, not contaminated. And in Nigeria now, we have the GMOs bill passed, the GMOs laws, and the GMOs approved. So what do you think would happen vis-a-vis promoting our Nigerian diets with the GMOs that are already running amok in our environments? I mean, how do we truly promote our Nigerian food, our African food, if we have them tainted with these genetically modified versions? If we have them, if we have a cassava that is GM cassava, GM rice, GM cowpea, how is that truly our my food, because to me, I mean, that is already tainted. So I know you and your organization have been doing a lot on GMOs and talking about growing food organically in a healthy manner. What can you tell us? How do we manage this? It's almost like contradictions, promoting my food with the food that's already contaminated or tainted with things that have been done to it.
Thank you so much, Mariann. So when we talk about genetic modification and the infiltration of these products, it's not just a challenge for Nigeria. It's something that is affecting and going throughout the African continent. And so we truthfully cannot say our food is African or our food is Nigerian when we're talking about GMOs, because to start with, that's not our food. So for the sake of those who probably are hearing about GMOs for the first time, we're referring to genetically modified organisms. So particularly in the agriculture system, genetic modification has been applied in other fields, but here the challenge is with food crops and animals that we use as food. So we have crops or animals being modified with the insertion of genes from either the same or different species, just so they can perform a particular purpose or function. So for example, genes from tomatoes can be taken and inserted into rice, just so that that rice can perform a particular function or have a particular characteristic. Now, there are so many challenges connected with this. Scientists have said that the results of this sort of manipulation or modification are not even fully known. But so far, there are already studies that have linked this sort of manipulation to, in terms of health, several genetic disorders, cancers, Alzheimer's, several diseases, what you call allergies, and all sorts of health challenges. And then the other issue is the environmental implications that they come with. Many of these genetically modified organisms, especially the ones we have in Nigeria, are so modified to withstand the use of particular herbicides, that are made by the same companies making these genetically modified seeds. So instead of reducing the dependence on these toxic chemicals that are sprayed on the farms, we have farmers having to use even more chemicals. Another issue with genetic modification of crops is the destruction of biodiversity, because these chemicals that are applied on the farms do not only destroy the pests or the weeds that they apply to destroy, they go ahead to destroy beneficial, microorganisms and other organisms in the ecosystem. So we have bee populations reducing, for example, and other soil microorganisms, that are useful for soil health, that helps to support plant growth and all of that. So we can't have African food. We can't have Africans in control of African food when we adopt genetic modification. Some people feel, okay, why don't we, we can promote local food, but then we still need GMOs to support for the increasing populations. Like Mariann said, they're contradicting. So by the time you bring in GMOs, the genes are dominant. So you're going to have local varieties going extinct because the modified genes are going to overtake the indigenous seeds. So they cannot coexist. I'll just stop there for the next questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Joyce, for that. You've said it very clearly. They cannot coexist. You can't. It's like night and day. You can't bring this thing and you're going to contaminate our varieties. So it is very, very clear. We're talking about promoting our food. My food is African. And once you do anything to my food, it's no longer my food. That is something completely different. So this question is open to all the panelists. So everyone has a role to play in preserving our food culture. I want to hear from Yemi, Ikenna, Joyce. Nimmo can also chip in if you want. What can folks do to promote change individually, collectively, or, I mean, wherever they may be, what can they do? I mean, just in seconds, what do you recommend we can do to build a food policy for Nigeria or for Nigerians, for Africans? What can we really do to promote this movement for a healthy food, for African food? It's almost like a vanguard. We want, my food is African, I am African, my food is power, my food, respect my food. What can we do? Just in seconds, before there are a lot of interesting questions, so we can just go to them, so we'll be able to answer them before we call it 90 minutes. Thank you. Who wants to go first? Yemin, you want to go first?
Okay, I'll go. I think regardless of where you are, it is important to do the work of finding out who's growing your food. One of the things that happens around the world, you mentioned it earlier, Mariann, is that we see farmers as people who are poor, people who are ignorant, you know, in Africa. In the West, you know, same thing, maybe not necessarily poor, but we have a lot of immigrants who are doing the work of growing food. There's a lack of awareness about who is growing your food and where your food is coming from. I think we could all do better in finding out where your food is coming from. Wherever you live, there are local farmers. Wherever you live, there's a market that sells food. Go to the market, ask the people who are selling the food, where's the food coming from? Take the time to find out. You need to start getting to know people who are growing your food and starting to ask them questions and starting to understand their plight and respect them. Mr. Bassey was talking earlier about how farmers are scientists. They're not only scientists, they're knowledge holders. They embody knowledge. They know nature and the environment better than any one of us because they live in it every day. There's so much knowledge that farmers carry and have that most people take for granted and don't respect. It's important, I think, is a good place to start. And it's what I tell people, and I believe is what I represent here, is putting a face to those who grow food. It is so important for you to know them, to support them, to ask them questions, and to find out what ways you can do to support them. And the most important way you can support them is, for now, is your money. Find out whether they're using GMO or not using GMO. Find out why they're using those GMO crop seeds in the first place. What are their challenges? How can you support them? I think that's a simple way to start, and everybody can come in based on their own particular expertise or skills. When young people come to my farm and they say, Miss Yemi, how do I become a farmer? Honestly, I tell them, become a policymaker, go to law school. Farmers need support. We need all types of different support. So we need people who are, you know, taking a look at who you are, what your own personal skills and interests are, and use that to support farmers. But you can't do that if you don't get to know them, and if you don't get to know the things that they're dealing with on a daily basis and what it takes them to put food on your table.
Thank you, Yemi. Ikenna, can you also answer this and also tell us, because somebody just sent me a private message, said, ask Ikenna. I mean, we are from Nigeria. We know that cooking is mostly, sometimes the food is a woman's thing, that women should be the one cooking and all that. And also, this is a change we're talking about, promoting food. Anybody can cook. Man, woman, boys, girls, I mean, you eat. I mean, everybody cook, everybody can eat. Why should it be an all women's affair? So Yemi just told us a little bit of what she thinks we could do. What do you think is this change that we want to embrace in really embracing an African revolution on food? And you as a young man, can you tell people what motivated you into cooking, into promoting Nigerian food, into promoting Ghanaian food, into promoting African food? I can see a proud African man who is also lifting up the banner of our food, that our food is healthy, respect our food, and cooking our food for people to eat, and also obtaining living from there. What changes do you want to see? And also tell us, what is your motivation?
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so growing up, I was fortunate to live within West Africa. I had my secondary school education here in Ghana. I lived in Benin Republic. I worked in Lomé, you know, and traveling, as a young teenager, because my dad was a clergy, and we followed. Hello, wherever I traveled, we followed. So growing up, I was introduced to, a melting pot of different West African cuisine, and it was, fast forward, I became a chef. So what really inspired me was my experiencing diversity within West Africa. And also growing up, this Cameroonian dish, because she had her kids in Cameroon. And I grew up eating Cameroonian food, and going back to culinary school and, seeing, culinary education, what is the future of, what about African food? How can we promote African food? How can we promote? Stumbled at this philosophy, which I hold very dear to me, is a global cuisine, from the lenses of indigenous African ingredients. And and I think, chefs, should push boundaries. Chefs, across Africa, across Nigeria, should push boundaries in exploring different diversity, different, food diversities in West Africa and also in Nigeria as well, because we're speaking of Nigeria. And also, I was also fortunate to consult for an eco lodge. They wanted to, change their menu, and what we did was we focused, the menu based on the food that was grown within that, environs. And I think, even because of the fact that I work in a culinary space, I think even restaurants should, buy into this ideology of, sourcing locally, supporting local farmers. I actually have a dessert that I made, that was, inspired by my visit to a cocoa farmer, and I named that dessert after the village where this cocoa was sourced. So I think it's just all about like appreciating, we need to support local farmers, and also, government policies on food as well. Like, government need to put, embargoes on, certain imported foods, and also encourage youths in agribusiness and agro processing as well. And also put local producers, like promote local producers in mainstream media. For instance, like you have, like in Nigeria, you have Gino Tomato, this Tin Tomato brand. You have Indomie. Some of all these brands. What about the local farmer who's growing fonio? How does he market his fonio? How can we promote these products from food processors, local food processors, and all these things. So I think that's a headway to go. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. For those who, I hope you heard Ikenna there loud and clear. The young man doing great things with our food, taking pride in our food. Loveline, are you ready? Joyce, is she going to call in?
Yeah, she's on standby. You can direct her question to her.
Yeah, so she can tell us what she thinks of the Nigerian food and what is happening to it now. In few words, before we go, there are a whole lot of questions from people, so we take the questions. Yes, Loveline.
Yeah. Mariann, can you hear her?
Not very well. It's not very clear.
When you book your own house,
Sorry, okay, thank you. I think it's not working. Let's go to the audience and let us take some questions. Chris, Yemi, Chris Makolo, incidentally, who used to be the chairperson of AFSA, is asking, Yemi is practicing agriculture in the USA. Can she tell us more about the influence of weather periods such as winter, autumn, etc., on a cultivation regime? Tell us also about the input into your crop production. And do you do it for self-consumption or for sale as well? Yemi, that's a question for you.
I can't get my video started, but can everyone hear me?
Yeah, sure, we can hear you. That's fine.
Okay, great. So I grow for both myself, of course, but also primarily to sell as well. And yeah, the weather does impact us greatly, but it impacts us in the sense that I'm in New York City, and whether or not I'm growing Nigerian food or the more local indigenous food here, there's no production in the winter for us. So production for us starts in March when we're seeding things. And then May, when everything that we have started indoors goes outside, mid to late May. And then because of climate change, New York City has now become subtropical. So that means that we have tropical temperatures from May through November. And honestly, it's the reason why I've been able to grow a lot of these vegetables. When I started farming 10 years ago, I'm not sure I would be able to grow most of the things that I'm growing now. So I'm just taking advantage of the fact that the climate has changed dramatically in New York. The other thing is the reason I'm also able to grow some of these crops is because I have some wonderful friends, a young man in Philly who focuses on breeding seeds from countries around the world. And he really does focus on West African and Southeast Asian varieties. So that's been really helpful. There's a farm in Texas called Emelife Farm, and I get things like ugu seeds and other things that I'm not able to get from True Love from them. So, you know, I think about what I want to grow and then look at what's available. And then there are some indigenous African crops that are a mainstay in the US, like okra. Okra is my absolute favorite thing. And you can find the seeds for okra everywhere. In the South, okra, people eat fried okra and eat okra in a bunch of different ways. So they're easy to get some of those seeds from them. There's also the Caribbean culture, and the Caribbeans that eat things like tete. They call it callaloo. So I basically go into these different communities and see what seeds I can get. The blessing of being in New York again is that we do have subtropical weather now in the summer. Climate change, I don't know how you want to take that, and more people embracing their own indigenous food and growing seeds. I find that if I cannot find it, if I cannot find a Nigerian farmer that grows something, if I do my research, I will find a Middle Eastern farmer, or I will find a Chinese or Thai or you know, a Southeast Asian farmer that has the seeds that I'm looking for, because we all pretty much eat the same things, maybe different varieties for different things. So that's how I'm able to grow these produce. There are some things like egusi that I get from True Love Seeds in Philly. And then honestly, there are things that I've snuck in from home and I'll give it to True Love to help me breed so that we can have more continuous seeds. And now I'm focusing more on saving those seeds and making the seeds more available to people.
Okay. Thank you so much, Yemi. This is a question for all the panelists. It's from Peter Gobbles. He's asking, you can read it from here so I can say it properly. He said, in Nigeria, there have been discussions around increasing the use of cassava flour in bread making in Nigeria as a way to promote the local production of cassava and reduce dependence on imported wheat flour. For example, in 2019, the Cassava Bread Development Fund was established by the Nigerian government to promote the use of cassava flour in bread making. What is your perspective in terms of my food is African? I am concerned because cassava can be produced locally, but not necessarily in an agroecological way. So, I mean, the question is also there. Any of you can answer? Yeah, Ikenna, yes, please, go ahead. Yes, please.
Yeah. How we are able to utilize the cassava as an ingredient. So I know of a woman. I know of a woman in Nigeria who makes pasta, who manufactures pasta from cassava. All right. And like, it's just all about how we can be able to utilize cassava. Cassava, we can make cassava biscuits. Even down here in Ghana, traditionally, there is a biscuit that is made from cassava. It's just all about finding ways in how we can utilize cassava, not just in breads, but you can make a cassava cracker. We can make, chips from cassava. We can make a whole lot of products from cassava. So I think it's something we need to think innovatively in how we can use cassava.
Thank you. Joyce, you wanted to say something? And while you are there, you can ask a question on HOMEP. Somebody's asking, does HOMEP have branches all around Nigeria? And are these meetings or activities to teach and practice some of these techniques on indigenous seed and agroecological ways of going about it? So you can answer that and also this one.
As well. Okay, so just to say that we can actually produce cassava agroecologically because, I mean, most of the smallholder farmers, or cassava is mostly grown by smallholder farmers. Let me start with that. There's hardly a farmer whose major crop that they produce is not cassava, even for those who produce just for subsistence. So I think the challenge really is how to produce that cassava in large scale. Yes, there's the challenge with the genetically modified varieties coming in, and then the many of the farmers are now resorting to pesticides, which are really toxic for the crop and for the soils as well. But generally speaking, most local farmers who do not use GMOs or who are not yet using GMOs or not yet using these pesticides are able to produce cassava. So I think the problem is to be able to support these farmers to produce the cassava in a large scale, that can be used to make this bread, flour, and the crackers, and all other products that can be made from cassava. So it's basically to support them in terms of credit, in terms of access to land, in terms of the infrastructure that they need to, process and also store cassava, as well as other local produce that many of them are interested in. Even young people, at least I know I have a friend that called some time back to ask about how she can venture into large-scale cassava production. So that's that. Then for the question about HOMEP being having offices across the country. I think we are in enough cities as it is. And yes, we've been organizing a number of trainings. I think that was last month. We had a practical agroecology training for farmers in the FCT. Earlier in the year, we had a training for farmers in Rivers State. So you can connect with us probably to find out where next we're going to be training farmers, and possibly if you are interested, you can join in that training. But it's something we want to do even more to encourage farmers to. The last training we had, it was at an agroecology farm. I mean, where farmers were able to see on the ground how agroecology works, because most people believe that you can't do agroecology on a large scale. Some people are not sure if it works, or if we're just promoting a mantra or something. But then it's something that is proven, and that works.
Thank you so much.
I hope that answers the questions.
Yes, I mean, because we are almost running, our time is almost fast spent, but I think this question from is very, very interesting, and it would be good if all of you can have a stab at it. It's saying, due to the diversity of cultures and types of foods in Africa, it may not be accurate to talk about African food or African cuisine. There are also differences with countries, and there's lack of adequate knowledge about foods from countries other than our own. What can the panelists suggest that should be done to close this gap of knowledge deficit? And is there African or even Nigerian cuisine? This is a question for all the panelists. And somebody was also asking, I mean, do you have a seed bank? And Ikenna, somebody's asking, do you have tell us more about the dessert or something? And they said, where do you source your seeds, or do you have a seed bank you resort to? And please try to read the charts. Loveline has sent in a number of answers to some of the questions, and it will be good if you can read them. She's having problems with connectivity. So please, panelists, make it brief. We have to round up soon. Just keep your answers short, and if you have time, just try to touch on most of the questions already sent in the chat box, and just keep it brief so we can go to your last closing words. Thank you so much. Ikenna, yes, over to you.
Okay, I would say, we've been, so separated by borders, and I think that's one of the things I'm talking in retrospect to the question about African cuisine, and see the cuisine of Africa as a borderless cuisine, in such a way that if I want teff from Ethiopia, I can cook teff from Ethiopia in West Africa, and fonio from West Africa can be used in Eastern Africa. I think it's just all about picking. We need to see our cuisine as from a borderless perspective. That's what I would say. And also on the question of the dessert. So the dessert is a cocoa pudding. So the name of this dessert is called Krabokese cocoa pudding. So Krabokese is a village in Sawam. It's about 2 hours away from Accra, and Krabokese is known for its agricultural scenery and greenery. And I was just so fascinated with the fact that there was this cocoa farmer who is who has this cocoa brand, and I was inspired by my visit to her farm, and we made this cocoa dessert, cocoa pudding. So it's a pudding, and we served it with a maize crumble and a baobab cream. So it's almost like you're having like a pot of cream, Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Joyce, yes, I see time up. Can you summarize? Joyce?
All right, so So yeah, I wanted to make a comment about the fact that African cuisines are different for each country, and even within Nigeria, different ethnic groups have their different foods. That's why one key thing that we should take away from here is the fact that food is important to each and every one of us, no matter where we are from. And so the key point is we should all have the right to what we want to eat and how we grow it. So as Africans, or as a Nigerian, or as a Delta person, you should be able to grow what you want to grow in a way you want to grow it, and you should be able to access, the resources that you need to produce that. So no matter the differences, we should all have a right to the food that we need to eat and how to grow it. And that said, for us to appreciate other people's culture, for us to appreciate other people's dishes, that's why it's important to have these cultural celebrations like our fathers had in those days. Let me not sound like I've been on this earth for so long, but I mean, we can have celebrations where different people cook their different dishes, and then we get to find out what other people's foods are like. That's why, as part of this campaign, we're going to have such an event at the end of this month, where different ethnic groups will come and prepare their food. AFSA has done something like that, where different African countries prepared their foods, and then it was really great because we're able to appreciate foods from different other countries. So I think this should be encouraged. Communities, I think some communities have done so. Some Yoruba communities have done so in the past, where they bring different groups of people together, and then they make food and they all eat together happily. I think that would really help us to appreciate and value our food as Africans.
Thank you so much, Joyce. It's diversity. There's beauty in diversity. We are different people. Look at us. We don't, even twins have different DNAs. We are different people. So that's, even with the diversity, there's this richness, the commonalities that if you come to Nigeria, like Joyce have said, different, north, south, east, we have different things, and they are nutritious, they are healthy, you want to eat them. If you go to Kenya, they are known for certain things. If you go to Uganda, you have the matoke. If you go to Ethiopia, you have the injera. This is the beauty of Africa. We have different, diverse, nutritious food that we could eat. So there's no need for all these tainted food they call GMOs for polluting, contaminating, and trying to tinker with our food, because nature has blessed us with just the best. The best food is in Africa. If you want anything, if you want it spicy, if you want it not spicy, there's just everything. We can whip up anything from just anything. So we celebrate our diversity. And one thing that we are calling is respect for our food, respect for the people who produce this food, respect for the farmers, respect for the people who grow these seeds. So we are going, before calling it a day, we are coming back to all the panelists, and we just want to, at least in just a few seconds, in honor of all the Nigerian mothers, in honor of all the African mothers, and so, and in honor of people who have gone before us, those who are still here and those who have gone, who also made this cuisine for us. Some of them are no longer here. Can you tell us, what is your favorite Nigerian or African food? And what memory does it evoke when you think about this food? Any of you can go.
Okay, so let me go first while we wait for others to speak. So my favorite Nigerian dish, actually, I love food, so it's hard to say which is my favorite, but one of the favorites is egusi soup, and that would be starch. Even though I'm trying to not eat it too much, to not add too much weight. But then the memory around this food is that I remember when I was really young and we went visiting my grandmother, and then there is a special pot that grandmothers use. Even after cooking the food in the main pot, they would always transfer it into this very small dish to recook it. I'm like, why? And then they say, oh, there's a particular flavor this pot. I'm not sure what the name is. Maybe Ikenna knows what it's called, but it's a black pot. So there is a particular way that food tastes, and I can't get that memory, off my head. I just remember, anytime I remember egusi soup. I remember that particular scene. And the fact that she picks up that pot from the fire with her bare hands. And then I remember screaming like, Mama. And then she's like, she's used to it and it doesn't burn her at all. So, and that's the beauty of, intergenerational knowledge and connectivity. So maybe my likeness or my the taste I have for that soup came from watching her cook it and watching her, enjoy it with the family. So that's that for me.
Yeah, that's so. I mean, I can imagine that hot food coming from. I mean, and they use the charcoal firewood to cook it, and it's. I told you guys something really nice, something really African. I mean, just remember, just put it in your head and remember this. Yes, Ikenna. What is your favorite food? I mean, for a chef, I wonder what it would be. I'm curious. And what are your parting words? Ikenna? Okay. While we wait for him, I mean, I think his connectivity is.
Okay, so I'll go. For me, it's either eba and okra soup, elasticol, or pounded yam. And elasticol. I can't tell you why. From little, eba has always been my favorite. Eba and okra soup is something I used to get when I did well in school. It was something that I would ask for and I would be rewarded with. So it just has a very special place in my heart. Actually, now when I go to Nigerian restaurants to get food, the lady that will be like, Eba and what? Because she knows me. I love okra. I love okra soup. I love pounded yam, real pounded yam. My mom is always like, Paloma Gunyo, who is going to be pounding yam for you? But it's my favorite. I don't know. It just makes me feel nourished, and I can't think of anything that says home more than that. And I crave it sometimes. I know I'm missing home when I crave it.
Yeah, thank you. I can imagine that. Yes, Ikenna. Are you ready for us now? Yeah, muted. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so my grandmother of blessed memory, she makes this very delicious dish called, it's a Cameroonian dish, but it's also very similar. It's like an egusi. It's an egusi dish that is egusi soup that is eaten with unripe plantains. And that's like my favorite.
Wow, that's so cool. I can imagine that. I mean, if we don't take anything, I mean, I hope that this conversation we've had this afternoon is enough to get us thinking, going back to our roots. I mean, nothing is more sweeter than the food cooked by our parents, by our grandparents, by our relatives. That is indigenous. It is sweet. There's a lot of history in it. That is why we don't want our seed, because the seed carries a lot of story. And then when you cook with so much love, I mean, if you're in the village, you see people cooking food, you want to eat. They're telling stories, the way they will wash it, the way they will prepare it. It already makes you salivating and you want to eat something. So truly, as we live, you go to a restaurant, please, let's not stop pizza, spaghetti. Let's go truly indigenous food. Eat something to eba. Eat eba, get soup, eat something really indigenous wherever, because there's people who produce that food with so much love, and it's also continuity. We want our children, the next generation, to know about, or this food speaks about a people, and also for respect for our food. If you don't respect our food, if we don't give it so much dignity and pride, then it means nobody would. So we are celebrating our food today. We are honoring our food from all over Nigeria and all over Africa. Our food is Nigerian, our food is African, our food is grown with so much love. My food is the food that I was given by my grandma, my mom, my relatives, food I can eat in Kenya, Addis Ababa, Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana, just local traditional food. My language is local, sweet, and nutritious. So just want to thank everybody here that has come. I can see, I mean, we still have a lot of people. We just want to thank you for showing up I just hope that when you leave this place, look for a local traditional food, the one that you eat and lick your hands. You know, that's how we eat in Africa. You eat with your hands, and you start thinking of how can we do to continue this culture of eating very good and nutritious food. Thank you so much. I don't know, Joyce, if you have anything to say before we call it one day, and we shall gather again to talk more about our food, about our culture, and one more thing, we respect our farmers that keep nourishing us, and we say thank you so much and blessings.
All right, so thank you so much to our participants. We are glad that you've been able to stay through to the end. We appreciate you. And we encourage that we continue these conversations. They shouldn't end here. Talk to somebody who will talk to somebody who will talk to somebody until we all learn to appreciate our foods. And we're not just doing this because we want to promote our food for the sake of doing so. Local foods are healthy foods, and that way we'll avoid a lot of the problems that we have brought upon ourselves by moving away from healthy foods, and also to encourage our government to put in place policies that will support the processes that will enable us to enable our farmers grow healthy indigenous foods, and as well to all our consumers to be able to do the same. So thank you so much. Just to mention again, we will share the link shortly for those who would like to join us in that food systems convergence coming up later in this month, and the food fair. We'll be able to connect to join virtually as well. So you can be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much, and bye for now.
Just you can play the song while people can enjoy it. I believe the music,
yes,
the song is good to different people. For those who want to listen to it, it's really powerful, made by our people from our colleagues from Kenya. Talks about the diversity in Africa, the pepper soup from Nigeria, the red plantain from Ghana, the matauke from Uganda. Just if you can play that song as we say good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you're coming from, and think Africa, eat Africa, and stay blessed. Thank you.
Traditions define our culture. Our culture defines our livelihood. Our livelihood defines our wealth. Our wealth, Africa, my wealth. Our traditional grains and legumes. Like our forefathers used to conserve. If it was good to them,
it's good to me.
If it was bad to them,
it's bad to me.
It was good to grandma.
It's good to me.
It was good to grandpa.
It's good to me.
If it was bad to grandma,
it's bad to me.
And if it was bad to grandpa,
it's bad to me.
That's why I'm saying, bring back, I say bring back. Africa said bring back the sesame, bring back. Rastaman bring back, slogan bring back. Ian Sand, don't forget the finger relay. No pest go touch, no disease go get it.
Our culture.
and it is resistant to drought.
Indigenous seed, our life.
So nice, so tasty.
African seed, our culture.
Say no, say no, say no, say no, say no to toxic pesticide affecting our bodies. Say no, say no, say no, while it's bad in Europe, still exported to Africa. Say no, say no. Resist multinationals pushing for adoption of GMOs.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for coming. Eat African. Respect African food. Respect our farmers. Thank you. My food is African. I love Africa.